Hello and welcome to Cordium's webinar. My name is Sarah Donnelly. I am the Sales Director for Cordium UK. Whilst people are logging in, could I ask all those already on the webinar to complete the polling question regarding what type of firm you represent? This will just help us focus the presentation a little more. Cordium is the leading provider of regulatory compliance, consulting, software, accounting and tax services. We currently support firms from offices in London, New York, San Francisco, Boston, Hong Kong and Malta. But today we're looking at the journey you could be taking to set up a regulated business here in London. Let me introduce the Cordium team. Philip Norton, Head of FCA Regulatory Compliance. Matthew Chris, Head of Financial Regulatory Reporting. Susa Kanagaraja, Head of Taxation, and Joe Vittoria, Head of Mirabella. In addition to these speakers, we are delighted to be joined by Karthik Iyer from the UK Trade and Investment, a government body focused on inward investment to the UK. So thank you, Karthik, for joining us, and I will let you lead off on the journey for firms coming from the US to the UK.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for taking time to attend, and thank you to the Cordium team for pulling this together. My name is Karthik Iyer. I work for UKTI, which is essentially a marketing and commercial arm of the UK government. And our job is to ensure we can help companies in landing in the UK, as well as once you're here to help you succeed and grow through international trade. So our team, FSO, which is a financial service organization, within UKTI focus on financial services, and within that I lead on asset management and capital markets. We have a team of professionals like myself who come from the industry. So myself worked in the asset management industry in Australia, Europe, India, and obviously in the UK now, and work with clients, asset managers and investors all over the world. So the idea is that we form a bridge between the private sector and public sector, so we can work with the policymakers and the industry to do what's best for the sector. Moving on, in terms of how we fit in, we take strategic direction from the UK Treasury, so right up to the Chancellor, George Osborne, and that mechanism works through the Financial Services Trade and Investment Board, which is essentially a group of government departments, including ourselves, the Foreign Office, but also more importantly, key players from the industry across asset management, banking, London Stock Exchange, so that we can together decide on what are the best triggers for the industry, both in terms of taking feedback from the industry, but also making informed policy decisions. UKTI specifically works, as I mentioned earlier, on the marketing aspects. So my role day to day is to how I take this to the road internationally. Obviously, part of that is also working with firms who are already here, international firms in the UK, in completing that loop of policy feedback and marketing. So in terms of the three key aims we have, is, as Sarah mentioned earlier, inward investment, foreign direct investment, and that could be companies setting up here, jobs created in the UK, but also capital coming into UK projects, UK asset managers or UK funds. We also help UK-based companies, and I should stress when I say UK-based, they could be from anywhere in the world. Some of you may have heard about what we call in the UK the Wimbledon Effect, which is essentially we create the environment for champions from all around the world to use UK as a platform to grow and win. So hopefully we can provide that for you as well today. And lastly, it's not just about bringing you here, but also having an ongoing relationship with firms and companies who are based in the UK in doing business in and from the UK for your global needs. Just a quick note on the government commitment, which is probably the key thing I would like to bring to the table today. It's probably something unique in terms of globally, very few countries, and I might dare say the only country where there's a specific strategy for investment management, and the government's behind it in terms of how they can create the right environment. As I said, you'll see the Chancellor's own words on the screen there. The idea here is very simple. It's win-win. We realize, and the Chancellor realizes, that having more assets under management is good for the economy, for the GDP, for jobs, and for the exchequer, tax revenue. So in the zero-sum game, basically what we're saying is each asset manager and you would like to have more assets under management. You win, UK as a whole wins by your combined assets under management, so we are all on the same page. And that's very clear in terms of what we're doing, what we will be doing, and the government support in achieving that end objective. So what is the UK Investment Manager Strategy, or IMS? The three strands, which on the left side of the slide you can see tax, regulation, and marketing. And this is something we've been focusing on, how to make it simple and friendly. So part of my job, apart from the feedback loop and working as a marketing person with the policy team, is also working with the regulators, the FCA, in terms of how we can make UK more business friendly. On the marketing side, obviously, part of it is what I'm doing now in terms of selling UK to you and making it easy for you to land in the UK. But equally, at a more operational level, I've been working with the pension funds around the world, asset managers around the world, whether it's in Brazil or in China or Australia, in understanding what their triggers are and what UK can offer, or more importantly, what UK asset managers or managers based in the UK can offer to those end investors, which will drive the AUM coming into the UK. So it's just marketing of UK, but equally marketing of the sector. And how do we achieve that? On the right side is a schematic which shows you the key activities, so you just get an idea of what we're doing. We look at how to expand UK domicile, how we sell UK asset management services, and also encourage international AIMs asset managers to set up in the UK. We have a concept of a one-stop shop, which I'll come to a bit later, where the government, as a free service, is providing this concierge kind of soft landing service, so you can ask any question, come to one person, which is me and my team, so we can help you in navigating your entry strategy into the UK. Apart from that, obviously, I work closely with industry, whether it's trade bodies, lobbying groups, in understanding what the industry needs are, and playing that bridge I mentioned earlier with the government, policymakers, and vice versa. The idea being that we then get a single voice and a single marketing force for the sector. The next slide's got a bit of information. I'll just draw it on the key messages so that you can always look at this later, and there's some more stats I can share with you. Key thing, so currently we're on about 6.8 trillion assets under management, which is number one in Europe as a whole. I think the big thing to note is that almost a third of that comes from international investors, so it's not just about local client base. And 40% of the ownership of these asset management companies is actually overseas, so it's not just UK-based companies, it's people from all over the world like yourselves who use the UK. There's some stats on the jobs created, which is probably the third of the jobs in that sector in the whole of Europe. And also from a hedge fund point of view, as you can see, it's a pretty large share of the global market in London alone. So I'll pause there. I'm sure you can digest the figures either from the screen or after the seminar and during the Q&A time. This one also gives you an idea of the ranking in terms of AUM, which is a key figure, I guess, for all of us on the left side in terms of the ranking. But also on the right side, probably key for many of the managers who are dialing in or people interested. So unlike some of the other countries where the concentration of the asset management of the AUM is with the big names, the big 5 firms, in the UK, as you'll see, it's quite diverse. So there is some big firms, but there's enough room for boutique firms and specialist firms to thrive in the UK. So it's not just the fact that it's only for the big boys or it's a saturated market. It's quite dynamic and open for business. This sort of a cheat sheet slide, I guess, if you were to ask why UK, it gives you the key reasons, and this is based on what I've heard from clients myself. I won't go on each one of them in detail, but you know, the position of the UK in the globe, not just physically, but in terms of the time zone between the US and Asia, which attracts a lot of people. I myself moved from Australia to equities team because of that reason, because our team relocated to UK when I was working with an asset management firm. But the other parts, which we've already touched on, government support, regulation, tax, which I'm sure our colleagues on the panel will be covering later on for your benefit. It's together creates sort of what we call a cluster effect in creating the right environment and the mix for people to thrive in the UK. I did touch on the one-stop shop, and as promised, this is a brief slide on what the one-stop shop does. So if you're looking at setting up in the UK, I've been involved in both pre-decision and post-decision, but the idea is basically we'll help you soft land across all those aspects of areas that's listed out there. And obviously working closely with Cordium or similar firms, advisory firms, who can help you with different aspects of how to enter into the UK. And Also, lastly, I guess the key things, once you're here, it's not just about getting you in. I work closely with many firms here, so on a weekly basis talking to the likes of BlackRock, in the case of the US, other hedge fund managers, firms from China or across the world, in how they can now, they're in the UK, grow from the UK and use UK as a platform. So hopefully I can field some questions later on once you've had a chance to listen to the others. And hopefully that's been useful, and I look forward to helping you in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Kartik. I hope everybody there feels officially welcomed by the UK government, and Kartik's outlined the help that his team really can offer, which is really invaluable to firms. So if we assume that Kartik and his team have assisted you in getting here, you've landed at Heathrow, now you need to get to the West End of London. If anybody doesn't know, that's the tube map of the West End of London. The journey from here looks simple, but any of you that are familiar or have been to London are well aware that this isn't always as straightforward as it should be. There can be stops, delays, derailments along the way. Our job at Cordium is really to take on assisting you, helping you through that journey, going through any possible problems you have and being there as your partner as you go through this journey. We will now walk through the steps that you need to take on coming to the UK, which you'll see coming up on the slide there. And I'd like to introduce Philip Norton, our Director of Compliance, who's going to take you through these steps one by one.
Thank you, Sarah. Firstly, do I need to be regulated? It's useful in general to consider activities a firm may carry out on a sliding scale, starting with marketing activity up to, for example, what is known as a full-scope AIFM, Alternative Investment Fund Manager. Marketing in itself is not a regulated activity, and there are, however, the activities of advising, arranging and making arrangements, which some firms may carry out as part of their marketing activity. Also, some firms choose to request FCA authorisation, although they are solely marketing, as there is credibility which comes with being FCA authorised. There may be a fund which the UK entity advises, and such UK entity would be referred to as an advisor-arranger. You may choose to manage with discretion. This may be managing funds, managed accounts, or a combination of both. You may very well hear terms such as MiFID firms, small or full-scope AIFM, CMP, CPMI. These are driven by the activities the firm is carrying out. Determine the activities, and the terms and associated obligations will naturally flow from these. There are essentially three elements to an FCA permission or license. What do I want to do? Advise, arrange, manage. What do I want to do it with? Shares, units, warrants, options, etc. And who do I want to do it with? Eligible counterparty, professional, or retail clients. One of the first questions the FCA asks when an application is being considered by them is whether legal advice has been obtained in relation to the activities being applied for. It's therefore vital that legal advice is obtained at the outset, and we, Cordium, with the benefit of this advice, can support you with putting together the application itself. Matthew, would you like to comment on other matters that need to be said?
Thank you, Philip, for running through the various types of activities that may cause you to be regulated in the UK. Before Sidra and I hand back to Philip to consider the regulatory hurdles to be overcome to commence regulated activity, we will consider the other matters to be addressed in the planning stage. Before we go into the detail, let me just say that these are all matters where Cordium will handle the execution on your behalf, based on your decisions informed by our advice. Over the past 20 or so years, we have worked with hundreds of asset managers, many from the US, in setting up and operating successfully in the UK. By the time you're in the planning phase, you will probably have identified at least one investment professional to start the UK office. If this individual is currently employed by you in the US or elsewhere in your global organisation, it may be possible to reduce the overall funding cost of UK operations by structuring the arrangements with this individual as a secondment. The UK Tax Authority, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, or HMRC for short, allows generous reliefs for seconded staff for a period of up to 2 years. This is referred to as detached duty relief, and by way of example, it is possible for personal accommodation costs to be paid out of gross income rather than net. The value of detached duty relief depends on the tax status of the individual or individuals concerned. For non-US citizens, including British nationals returning to the UK from the US, these can be significant. Whether or not the tax duty relief savings merits seconding individuals into the UK, it's important to ensure that the non-UK income of any individuals moving to the UK does not become taxable in the UK, and our personal tax specialists will undertake pre-residence planning with such individuals so that steps are taken to keep non-UK earnings free of UK tax. One of the conditions for achieving the tax duty relief is that individuals are treated as employees for tax purposes. Any business with employees in the UK must register as an employer with HMRC in order to run a payroll, and must then make statutory deductions for income tax and national insurance contributions, and make monthly and annual filings to HMRC. National insurance is a tax on employment falling on employers and employees, with employers' contributions set at a higher rate of 13.8%. For US taxpayers seconded to the UK, it is generally possible to remain in FICA, and this will result in a 100% saving of both employers' and employees' national insurance costs. Our payroll team will take care of the HMRC employer registration for you in the month that you first intend to pay your employees. The process takes only a matter of days. And will take care of the calculation of deductions, as well as all monthly and year-end reporting to HMRC, paying employees and HMRC, and preparing electronic payslips for your employees. As a UK employer, you will need employment manuals and employment contracts. Cordium provides human resource consulting to assist in these matters, as well as a recruitment service to assist you to find back office and support staff to supplement the investment talent you will be deploying in the UK. To enter into employment contracts, you will need a UK legal entity, possibly more than one. We will set these up for you, typically within a day or two. Though before we do, there are important tax considerations to take into account in determining the optimum structure for your UK operations and how they interact with the rest of your group. It is important also to bear in mind that FCA regulated entities must maintain a specified level of regulatory capital once authorised, and that the legal structure chosen may result in a higher consolidated capital requirement. So capital efficiency as well as tax efficiency are both factors to be identified and addressed at the planning stage. Our regulatory accountants work alongside our tax specialists to ensure that the chosen structure is practical and efficient from a capital perspective as well as in tax terms. I'll now hand you over to Sudha from our tax team, who will talk a little about the tax treatment of the entity types available.
Thank you, Matthew. Before I do, it is worth noting that, like the US, the UK operates a worldwide taxing regime. Now, where two such regimes collide, getting credit for foreign taxes and avoiding double taxation is not straightforward. However, with careful planning and execution, double taxation can almost certainly be avoided. Moving on to UK legal forms. There are two types of vehicle to be considered, and it may be appropriate to use more than one entity in your structure. The first entity type is an LTD, which is similar to an Inc. vehicle in the US. An LTD is an opaque entity for tax purposes. This means that the LTDs are subject to UK corporation tax on their profits. The current rate of corporation tax is 20%, but this is falling to 19% from April 2017, 18% from April 2018, and then 17% from April 2020. With an LTD as your operating entity, all personnel are employees, and their salaries are reported to HMRC by the payroll, with income tax and national insurance deducted at source and paid at HMRC monthly. LLPs are similar to US LLCs and are tax transparent for UK tax purposes, meaning that its members, i.e. those that have an interest in the LLP, are treated as if they were carrying out the business of the LLP themselves. Members of an LLP are taxed in the UK on their share of the LLP's profits. An individual who is a member of an LLP is considered to be self-employed, and the highest rate of income tax is currently 45%. Self-employed individuals are required to file a UK tax return each year and pay their income taxes in January and July. The tax affairs of LLP members are considerably more complex than that of employees, and we will assist members with their personal tax affairs to ensure compliance with HMRC requirements. There is no employee's national insurance, which, as Matthew explained earlier, 18.8% of compensation payable on members' remuneration. so it may seem sensible to make all senior staff members rather than employees. There is, however, anti-avoidance legislation which requires that only those actively involved in the management are treated as self-employed. Depending on the facts of each case, it should be possible for staff taking investment decisions and those acting as compliance officer and money laundering reporting officer to be treated as self-employed. Where individuals are capable of meeting the management test, the saving of employers' national insurance is a key benefit of an LLP structure. On the other hand, however, detached duty relief and FICA-related savings are only available in respect of employees, so an LLP, despite its attractions on the surface, may not always provide the optimum structure. A detailed analysis is required, and practical considerations come into play as well. For example, with an LTD, if you anticipate adding to the senior team and providing equity to new joiners, this will generally require a restructuring of the entity's capital, which will require legal advice and typically will constitute a taxable event. With an LLP, the flexibility to change the team is typically embedded in the LLP's constitutional documents, and no taxable event will occur generally on any such change. Once the structure has been set up, you'll be able to register with HMRC for value-added tax, or VAT. VAT is a tax charge on the supply of goods and services, and is normally charged at 20%. You are likely to pay VAT on most of the purchases made by your UK entity. If you are providing fund management services, but are not marketing your fund to UK retail investors, you'll be able to recover the vast majority of the VAT suffered on invoices. By registering for VAT, you effectively cut the cost of purchases by 1/6, reducing the funding cost of your business. We will handle the registration process for you. The sooner you register, the sooner you will receive your first rebate, so there is a strong cash flow advantage in registering at the earliest opportunity. Matthew's regulatory accounting team handle all Cordium client VAT reclaims, and I will let him take over from here.
Thanks, Sula. In your first VAT reclaim period, you will typically be making quite a large VAT reclaim, as you will have incurred set-up costs, including advisors and lawyers' fees, in getting established and potentially in also becoming FCA authorised. Like most tax authorities, HMRC prefer collecting money to paying it away, and you should therefore expect that HMRC will visit your UK business premises to ensure that your UK business exists, meets the criteria to be allowed to register VAT, and that you have the correct systems and controls around your accounting to ensure that claims for repayment are accurate and in accordance with VAT law and applicable accounting standards, which are either UK GAAP or International Financial Reporting Standards, otherwise known as IFRS. We will sit with you through that meeting to make sure that HMRC fully understand the nature of your business and that there is no question regarding your VAT recovery. Within a matter of days of that meeting, you will see your first reclaim credited to your bank account. Thereafter, claims will be made and repayments received on a quarterly basis. Sula.
Once the entity starts trading, you then need to notify the HMRC that a trade has started. If you have an LLP structure, you also have to notify them of the identity of all LLP members. Such individuals will be subject to self-assessment, which means that they will need to submit a personal tax return every year. Again, Cordium will look after all of these filings.
Thanks, Sula. So, in summary, once your business is operational, it will have monthly reporting to HMRC on payroll matters, quarterly VAT reclaims to HMRC, as well as annual filings to HMRC and the Registrar of Companies, including annual financial statements which will be made publicly available. Cordium will prepare and submit all of these filings. Once you're approved as a regulated entity by the Financial Conduct Authority, regular regulatory reporting will be overlaid on top, and the business must be able to demonstrate that it has monthly management accounts and regulatory capital analysis in order to meet the FCA's requirement to have adequate capital in the business at all times. Naturally, as your outsourcing partner, this is all included in the scope of support we provide you. The precise timing of the requirement depends on a number of factors, and you will see on the screen a typical reporting schedule for a firm that is inbound from the United States. Our role in all this is to prepare the necessary reports and filings and to continually update capital forecasts so that any forecast shortfall in capital is identified well in advance and to advise you on remedial action to be taken. Breaches are reportable to the FCA and in certain circumstances must be reported publicly in your publicly available financial statements that your clients and competitors will be able to see. So managing capital to avoid any breach is an important part of your infrastructure as a regulated entity. However, before the items shown on the screen in purple become applicable, you will need to be approved by the Financial Conduct Authority as a regulated entity. And Philip will now tell you more about the process and how Cordium will assist.
Thank you, Matthew. So, preparing and submitting an FCA application. As advised, you need to determine what permissions you need to obtain your regulated activities. The core of your application is a business plan. This should detail matters such as the background to the business, the proposed business and operating model, long-term business and expansion plans, comment on detail and commentary on governance and culture, systems and controls such as liquidity, risk management, leverage, prime brokers, marketing and cross-border activity, and also the business risks of the firm and how they are managed. We've many years' experience in working with firms to document their business plans to a standard which is acceptable to the FCA. A detailed set of financial projections must be submitted to the FCA as a core part of the application. These must be reflective of the business plan for the regulated entity and be prepared in accordance with your chosen accounting framework, which, as Matthew has mentioned, can either be UK GAAP or IFRS. The financial projections will be comprised of profit and loss account, balance sheets and cash flow statements, all interlinked with each other and with regulatory capital forecasts. Each of these four elements must be prepared on a month-by-month basis, and the regulatory capital forecasts must show that capital resources exceed FCA capital requirements by a buffer of at least 20% in each month. The revenue assumptions embedded in the projections must be reasonably conservative and the cost assumptions prudent in order that the case officer in the FCA does not have concerns regarding the proposed capitalization level of the UK business. Our regulatory accountants will work with any high-level projections you have already prepared as part of your decision to establish in the UK, sense check these against actual costs incurred by Cordium accounting clients through setup and beyond, and ensure that the accounting rules of UK GAAP or IFRS, as appropriate, have been respected. We will advise on the minimum amount of capital that needs to be deployed into the business to provide the case officer with comfort that the business is being established on a sound financial footing. The name of the game here is to avoid overcapitalization of the business, as once capital is deployed into a regulated entity, FCA approval is required for it to be withdrawn. We typically advise in excess of 50 clients each year on efficient capitalization levels, and through the ongoing capital monitoring work performed by our regulatory accounting team, once the firm is authorized, ensure that clients are able to stay on the right side of the FCA's requirement to maintain adequate capitalization levels at all times. The FCA takes a very dim view of firms who do not maintain adequate financial resources. For different types of firms, we have developed what we style an infodocs, which is a single questionnaire which gleans all the principal information required to populate the numerous FCA forms which collectively make an application. Waiting for FCA approval. With a fair effort from standing still, it can take approximately 2 months to put an application together. To do this, you'll need to have determined matters such as your corporate structure, limited versus LLP, and the role the firm will play. For example, will it only advise or will it manage? I can't stress enough that it is vitally important there is full disclosure to the FCA at the outset of submitting an application, in particular in relation to approved persons. These are individuals who need to be registered for the FCA to carry out specific designated roles such as partners, directors, compliance officer, money laundering reporting officer, and those holding the customer or advisor function. We've seen occasions where non-disclosure of a matter the applicant did not deem material comes to light, and this has delayed the approval of the firm for a number of months, with the FCA believing that there is perhaps more information yet to come to light. The FCA's perception is the firm or an individual may have knowingly withheld information. The application is then submitted to the FCA, and it is currently 5 to 6 months before that application is allocated to a case officer. The FCA cost for an application is typically £5,000. Responding in a timely fashion to FCA requests is very important, as well as providing in the response exactly what the FCA require. We are in the background at all times to draft responses to FCA requests, and these are then provided officially by the firm direct to the FCA. The firm will go through a series or round of questions for the case officer. It's not unusual for these questions to take place over 2 to 3 months, and all in it can be 9 months or more from submission to authorization. So with the FCA's current processing times, you would need to plan for 9 to 12 months from submission to obtain authorization. You are then AST or authorized subject to, the subject to being matters such as the signing of formal agreements and proof of capitalization. The FCA determine your first year's fee based on firstly income and or assets under management assumptions as detailed in your business plan, and secondly the timing of when you are authorized in that calendar year. You can choose the exact date, which obviously needs to be post the FCA giving you the AST date. So for example, if you were authorized in Q2, you simply pay 3 quarters fees, Q2, 3 and 4. For fee purposes, the FCA works on a calendar year basis. Getting FCA authorization. Once approved and capitalized, you are then just over halfway along our tube line. The FCA register will reflect your firm name, address and contact details in addition to the regulated activities you have been granted and those who are approved persons within your firm. If you wish to passport into Europe, that needs to be attended to, as you can only apply once you are authorized. It cannot be included as part of the application. If you're an alternative investment fund manager, you'll need to separately register with the home state regulator in each jurisdiction you wish to market. We can advise you on the general process where you wish to carry out activities in Europe. Starting regulated activities. The slide you will have seen previously as part of Matthew's briefing. Apologies, but due to technical difficulties, the intended slide is not available. The compliance slide follows the same format in that it shows month by month what activities a firm should carry out, such as Gabriel reporting, Annex 4 reporting, and matters such as periodic reviews of inducements, personal account dealing, portfolio compliance, and market abuse testing, in addition to capital adequacy monitoring. There are lots of matters that need to be attended to, and Cordium can assist you with these. The final version of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, and the correct slide will be available then. You'll need to have continuing starting regulated activities. You'll need to have your infrastructure, policies and procedures in place at authorization. We are very well honed in working with firms efficiently and effectively to collaboratively put these in place. With your FCA application, you will have been required to submit a draft compliance monitoring program, and we will, as part of the application, have advised you on the most appropriate plan influenced by how you are organized and your regulated activities. The application committed to that monitoring being carried out, and we can do this for you through an agreed series of reviews or audits. Cordium has developed 2 proprietary software systems, Pilot and ELF, which can assist with this. We use the Pilot system ourselves to deliver our compliance work for clients. Clients can also have access to the system where they wish to carry out their own monitoring, with Cordium providing periodic oversight, or alternatively, Cordium can do all the lifting relative to the monitoring, and you can approve such monitoring, allowing you to be more engaged in the monitoring itself. ELF stands for Employee Level Filing and can act as a firm's policy and procedure intranet, as well as a portal through which employees submit requests for personal account dealing, gifts and benefits, outside business interests, and periodic attestations. It has an optional feature of broker feeds, which will reconcile with requests made and flag anomalies. As referenced by Matthew, we will provide support in relation to reporting relative to FCA Gabriel's system and also general financial management and reporting. Where a firm is required to make what are known as Annex 4 reports, we can equally assist with the preparation of these. Finally, we can be deployed on one-sort projects such as deep dive reviews on areas such as transaction reporting or conflicts of interest. Being authorized. So this is not yet the end of the story. You'll need to keep up to date with all new regulations and matters such as enforcement actions. What impact do they have on you? What, if anything, do you need to do differently? You'll need to maintain your policies and procedures, ensuring they are up to date with current requirements and industry practice. You need to keep your eye on the capital adequacy ball and also ensure that minimum training requirements, such as those relating to anti-money laundering, are met. This is in addition to ensuring that all the team are initially and on an ongoing basis competent to carry out their roles as required by the FCA, training being a very important element of ensuring this. Where a firm manages an alternative investment fund, there is the FCA specific reporting, risk management and capital adequacy monitoring, as your capital requirement is related to your assets under management, which will change over time. With nearly 20 years experience in this field, we're very experienced in supporting firms in dealing with these matters. We can guide and support you in your ongoing compliance obligations, make you aware of relevant changes to requirements or practice, provide updated collateral where relevant, and can support your training needs, telling you what you need to know when you need to know it. Finally, there are of course non-regulatory matters. Companies House, HMRC and various filings, and we can additionally support you in these, making the complicated uncomplicated. Moving on, you are now fully operational. Congratulations.
Thank you, Philip, for that, for a detailed summary of the FCA application process. As you may all be aware, it's quite a different process than many of you will be familiar with. If you're comparing this to an SEC or CFTC registration, it is quite a different path. And as Philip's pointed out, not the easiest at times, but we are there to help. The next question, though, is there an easier way? And I'm going to introduce Joe Vittorio, who's going to talk you through one of our other services that offers another option.
Thank you, Sarah. So I guess to recap the journey so far, which we've taken with my Cordium colleagues here, Cordium can make it a simpler and less arduous journey, but it's still taking a long time. So can it be made quicker? The biggest delay continues to be in the middle part, waiting for the FCA authorization. As Philip has described, it can take 6 to 9 months or even longer. As is probably not surprising, when an inefficiency appears in a financial market, the market normally finds a way to overcome it. And in this case, since regulatory delays have been common for over a decade, the regulatory hosting industry has evolved to overcome this inefficiency. Mirabella is a leader in this industry, and we can take a big chunk out of the time it takes to get started. I will explain now how hosting works. As Philip explained earlier, the type of regulated activity you need to perform will dictate what type of regulatory license you need, and this extends to what type of temporary solution is available for you. If your activity does not require discretionary decision-making, then the activity is probably just an advisory one. Discretion here simply means the ability to commit someone else's money without their consent. Unlike in the US, the term investment advisor in Europe is someone who can only advise and not manage money. Another regulated term used here is arranging, which is essentially the preparation of a transaction in regulated securities. Philip mentioned earlier, these functions are often bundled together to describe a type of firm which is an advisor-arranger. The advisor-arranger includes firms such as private equity, real estate managers, and infrastructure managers who are looking at or advising to self-managed funds. These self-managed funds are where the board holds the discretion, but the advisor really does all the work to prepare the deal. An advisor-arranger also includes firms like corporate finance and marketing firms where they're marketing unregulated funds. The FCA rules allow a regulated firm, such as Mirabella, which holds certain permissions, to grant another firm access to these same permissions by making it what's called an appointed representative. This is a useful process because it is simply a notification to the FCA rather than an application, and therefore takes only about a week to get granted. So in a very short time frame, a new firm can become an appointed representative of another firm and can start to perform the same activities as any other licensed advisor-arranger firm. it can do so in its own name, and its people would appear on the same FCA register that Philip alluded to a minute ago. So the firm that has granted this license to the appointed representative is called a principal firm, and that's the role that a firm like Mirabella would hold. However, if the inbound firm needs the ability to trade with discretion, which is unavailable to an appointed representative firm, then the regulatory hosting solution becomes a bit more complex. In this situation, Mirabella will act as the investment manager, and the client's traders will be seconded into Mirabella to perform the required investment tasks. To those who are not familiar with secondment, it's an agreement between two firms to essentially share personnel. Mirabella's risk officers will work with the client firm, especially firms who have extensive risk management capabilities, and create a set of risk and operational procedures and policies. These documents will govern the trader's day-to-day activity, and Mirabella will then police this activity. It is important to remember that these rules are determined by the client and not Mirabella. Mirabella just ensures adherence to the rules, which are, as I said before, designed by the client. All the agreements are written in such a way to prepare for the smoothest possible transition away from Mirabella to the client itself on the day that the client gains its own FCA authorization. Our goal is for that day to pass without any significant change to the client's process. In fact, most people in the client firm would not even notice that it happened. The regulatory host must ensure that the people it registers with the FCA are, and the term used here is, fit and proper, as well as competent in the roles that they must undertake. So the firm, the principal firm, must undertake active and appropriate monitoring of the client's activity, no matter what type of regulatory permission is being used. And in this context, I think we have to warn people that you should really try to go to firms that do this for a living, because that monitoring activity is something that firms that are just, let's say, normal regulated firms would find a little unusual and different to their normal day-to-day activity. So we have been talking about the benefits and describing some of the aspects of regulatory hosting. Firstly, you get to skip the long wait for authorization. The normal onboarding process to get onto Mirabella so that we can conduct all the checks, undertake all the references, etc., and then register you with the FCA normally takes about a month, as was indicated in the previous chart, considerably shorter than the 6 to 9 month period. You'll also be able to hire the people with a certain knowledge that you can start on time. This is often, because of the long delays, frustrating for inbound firms who are trying to juggle keeping people on hold while waiting for their license to come through. Also, it's worth mentioning that the FCA will, it's very unusual, if not impossible, for the FCA to regulate a firm that only has one individual in it. And for many inbound firms, they usually only have one person who's sort of kicking off the local activity. Whereas in the regulated space, you can actually start with just one person. Under the hosting umbrella, you will have no FCA reporting requirements, and similarly, you'll have no FCA capital requirements. This is also useful as you get to understand more about what's going on. In fact, our people will be there to help you with the risk management and compliance and to understand what's happening. In fact, a lot of people see this as somewhat of a training program to prepare themselves for the moment when they have to start their own regulated activities. So just to recap a little bit more about Mirabella for those who may not be aware. Mirabella within the UK market is probably the best known and most referred provider in regulatory hosting. This is predominantly because of the reputation which Cordium and Mirabella itself bring to this service, which I think is unparalleled within this industry. Mirabella has over 110 people currently registered with the FCA as approved persons. We have had over 800 since we started. We currently have over $5 billion in assets, which we manage over 16 different mandates. We have over 40 appointed representative firms at the moment. We've had 100 since our inception, and we've been doing this exclusively as a host since 2004 with no other in-house activity. We have a client-facing team of 13 professionals that are experienced in both compliance and risk management. If you're you're thinking in terms of the investors in a lot of our funds who come and do due diligence on Mirabella, we've been passed by some very significant sovereign wealth funds, global seeding firms, pension funds, etc. So that indeed many of these investors have recommended us to their managers, such is the trust that they hold in our services. I just wanted to mention at the bottom there that I'm going to be in the New York, Connecticut area, and I'm available for meetings the week of April 11th. And I look forward to meeting you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Now, I hope that has proved a useful journey through everything you're going to have to worry about when looking to come to the UK. What we've tried to do today is walk you through that journey and highlight where we can help, from your structuring, from your regulation, and from the possible option of having a hosted solution that really, you know, in essence, Joe has outlined all the advantages, but the main one there is that it just gets you to market more quickly. That's you know, the thing that is most important to most people. It's worth noting at this point that the areas that we don't deal with, there are other considerations you're going to have. You may have immigration issues with work permits for individuals. You may be looking for office space, which in central London is a challenge within itself, and technology infrastructure. These are areas we don't cover ourselves, but we work with a number of trusted partners that can assist you in these areas. What we've been talking about today is really Cordium's bread and butter. We look after hundreds of firms in the same sort of situation, what we'd call coming inbound into the UK, and we've been doing this for 10 years. Going on to the questions section here, I'm supposed to remind you to look on the webinar control panel, which I hope you can all see, where you can enter questions. I'll say now, if we run out of time before we get to all of these questions, we will come back and answer them all by email, and I also will be following up with a call with all of you. So if we don't get to every question, please be reassured I will get back to you as soon as possible on that. But before we do that, there's one thing that we haven't mentioned the whole way through this webinar, which is a little bit of a big issue here in the UK at the moment, and that's the issue of the Euro referendum. I'd just like to ask Karthik if he would possibly give what I presume will be a succinct government view on the Euro referendum whilst you're all putting your questions in. Okay, there's also going to be a poll up there. If you could also indicate on that whether the EU referendum is going to have an impact. You'll see that in front of you. That would be great. Thank you. Karthik.
Thank you. So on the referendum itself, which is in a couple of months, obviously it's a wide-ranging issue. I can give you the facts and I can suggest a succinct answer, mainly because honestly, from a democratic point of view, as many of our friends will know from the US, it's in the hand of the voters. From the government of the day point of view, the view is that the UK will benefit more from being inside a reformed EU, and that's been the negotiation with the Prime Minister has been doing early part of this year, with the key things like economic governance, competitiveness, welfare and free movement, and sovereignty, as in retaining the pound, being the key issue. So there's wider macro issues which have been looked at. So from the government point of view of the day, the idea is that we will benefit being part of the reformed EU. As most of you know, that gives us access to what 500 million population of investors from an asset management point of view, and the free trade agreements and investment in and from the EU. So the government views that being part of the reformed EU is the best option, but at the end of the day, I can't open. I guess nobody can until the democratic process takes place.
Okay, thank you for that. Interesting. I've just seen those poll results come up. I'm curious as to whether it's really 50-50, or there are some people on the line that are not committing either way as to whether this will impact them or not. We could do a whole other webinar on this issue, so I'm not going to linger on it for long. But if that was an interesting result, right? I'm just going to some questions here now. I've got one coming in, which is an interesting one, as to how does the FCA view the hosted solution? That's probably one for Joe.
Okay, thank you. The FCA have shown over the years that because of the delays that they regrettably incur in getting people authorized, they've come to rely somewhat on the hosting solution to maintain people's interest perhaps in starting businesses here, because as we mentioned before, they don't really want to wait a long period of time. So the FCA, the FCA are fully up to speed and knowledgeable about the activity of hosting firms. They understand how we operate. There isn't a specific set of rules that's different from us versus anybody else. So obviously we have to adhere to the same set of regulations. But the FCA also sees us a little bit like a pressure release valve, so that when the applications become very delayed, we can help them out in that area.
Okay.
Also, just to say, in the retail space, networks, which are firms that have more than 5 appointed representatives, very, very well established. Some of the biggest networks will have thousands of appointed representatives.
Yeah.
So, as you said, yeah, not specific rules. It's all just about being organised in a responsible manner and business as usual for the FCA.
Okay, thank you both for that. Okay, I've also got a question here on somebody asking on the hosted solution, how long do people stay? I think before handing over to Joe, who could talk ad infinitum about this, I think it depends on the usage. We see a lot of firms that will use it in tandem, will use it to get to market more quickly, but for varying reasons there are firms that would want to stay on for longer. Mirabella will always treat every client as if they're coming on for good. But, you know, so Joe, would you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's true. I think that people are staying longer now because they do get a bit more comfortable and they like the environment. But I do think that the Mirabella doesn't have a minimum or maximum period. It has a view, as you said, that people can stay for as long as they like. I think that we are going to run a last poll question, also because it can help us to understand perhaps what our clients' views and what might be looking into a UK office, what the drivers would be when considering one. And it would be useful if people could take a minute just to give us some feedback on that, so that we can help to maybe deliver some more answers. Sorry, there's a number of questions coming in now, so we're just trying to figure out how to respond to all of them.
Okay, we have had a question, if London is not where we're looking, are there other EU jurisdictions?
Yeah, I guess I can answer that as well. We're obviously we're very happy to talk about the UK as an important jurisdiction, but equally we're very active in Malta, which we believe is a very favorable jurisdiction for US managers coming over to the EU. But clearly we're also linked in with various providers in other jurisdictions, but those are the two that we favor at the moment.
Okay, sorry for the silence here. We're all quite interested in the answers of the poll, so as we're sitting here looking at that, which is an interesting one. Okay. Yeah, the likelihood of fundraising obviously coming out as quite a clear main driver for a lot of you. So a third of you, over a third, are looking at that as a main driver, which not overly surprising, but I suppose it's interesting from the size of that vote. Okay, any other questions coming in? I think a couple of them I think we've probably already covered. Okay.
Volume's gone. You're saying the volume's gone?
You can't hear me at all.
Yeah,
okay, sorry, apologies for that. I just thought we lost audio there. I'm going to say, just looking through the questions, I think we've covered most of them. An interesting question on how we project manage this. Obviously, you've heard from lots of different speakers today, but we are all based in the same office here in London. We work as a team. So if you were looking to come to the UK, we would look to project manage you with an individual that would be your main point of contact, and then beneath that you would have members of the relevant teams working with you, so your tax person, your accounting person, your compliance, but you would have one main point of contact who will be coordinating that, and will see you through this whole process. And if you're using us for ongoing support post your authorisation, we'll be the person supporting you ongoing as well. So an awful expression expression I hear a lot, but it is a one throat to choke approach, but it means you always have somebody to revert to. Okay, I think we've probably just about covered. There are a couple of quite specific questions there that I'll actually get back to rather than bring into a wider environment. I'll contact people on directly. But unless there's anything else, thank you very much for your time and attention. I do hope you found that useful. As Joe mentioned, he will be in New York in the next coming weeks and would love to catch up. I will be following up with all of you in the next couple of days by email and by phone. So thank you once again, and I believe Kartik just wants to finish off with...
No, I was just going to add to your point earlier, as part of the one-stop shop in terms of the services you mentioned, we do have, UKK itself has a visa division, and I've helped quite a few firms in terms of the visa queries, policy advice, but as well as help, and other firms in London and wider in UK who help with real estate, office location, including a school for kids for people moving over to the UK, so London and Partners, which is Boris Johnson's department, but equally in Manchester, Leeds, Scotland, we can cover that through our network for people who want to.
Okay.
I was going to say, for those, you're going to New York, but there's a seminar being held in New York where the FCA is going to be on a panel, a regulatory panel on the 2nd of May. I can send that to Cordium team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any details for people who want to talk to FCA.
I'll make sure details of that go out. The other thing is I believe that a copy of this webinar will be on our YouTube page in the next couple of days. But as I say, I'll be in touch. If there's anything anybody wants to ask or wants before tomorrow, then please feel free to drop us a line, but otherwise we'll be following up with all of you. As I say, once again, thank you for your attention, and I hope you found it useful.